Well, the ceasefire in Ukraine is 1 week old, but fighting does continue. And here to talk about that and the latest with Islamic State is Anthony Salvia. He's a former U.S. State Department official in U.S.-Russian affairs and the former acting and deputy director of congressional affairs in the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency. Welcome. Thanks for joining us again. Okay, the ceasefire is a week old. There had continued to be skirmishes and fighting in certain areas. Talk to me about where we are right now.
Well, it's normal that after a ceasefire there remain kind of skirmishes going on. That happened after the September 5th ceasefire, and it didn't mean that the thing didn't work. It's just sort of normal in these situations. What you don't want to see are like major operations, and that we haven't seen so far. Okay, what you want to see now is the implementation of the main part of the agreement, which is the pullback of heavy artillery to the pre-agreed regions. And that hasn't happened yet. The OSCE, which is monitoring all of that, says they're expecting to get lists of the inventory of what each side has, so they can, because otherwise they can't tell whether, in fact, the stuff is being moved. They're
really there or not anymore. Well, we know in the city of Debaltseve, where there were 8,000 Ukrainian troops that were basically, told to sort of stand down by the insurgents. Talk to me about what happened in that particular area.
Well, the whole thing is a little bit murky, but basically what happened was the Ukrainian army got itself surrounded by the pro-Russian insurgency on all sides. And this was happening right at the time the Minsk agreement was being worked out in Minsk between Germany, France, Russia, and Ukraine. And so, it was an awkward situation. And then what do you do about it? The Russians said, drop your weapons and leave, and we'll let you leave. Some chose to do that. So, in other words, some, in effect, surrendered. Some sort of disappeared through the lines. Was it desertion? Was it surrender? It's not clear. And there was no doubt also some shooting. So there's those who may have resisted. There may have been some shooting going on even post the signing of the ceasefire.
You mentioned the September ceasefire, and of course this one just a week old. Some people say this will not last, that this isn't really going to stick.
Well, I don't think these things are really intended to. I mean, all parties had differing motives for entering into this agreement. And one thing that the Ukrainians wanted to do was to buy some time. They were not doing well on the battlefield. They want time for U.S. weaponry to possibly reach them, because right now there's sort of discussion going on in Washington as whether heavy lethal weaponry should be sent over there. The Russians say the U.S. are already doing that, but they need to regroup. The reality is that politically in Kiev, the president of Ukraine cannot tolerate a situation for his own political survival where he appears to be acquiescing to the division of the country. Right.
And I mean, what does this really mean for us, for Western nations and for the United States? Because we know that this all sort of started because Ukraine wanted to join the EU, and then Russia was like, no, we don't want you to do that.
Right. And then also the U.S. began working with local forces to overthrow the legitimately elected president of the country, and then the Russians said that constitutes interference in and many Ukrainians, the East Ukrainians, said that constitutes interference in the affairs of our country, because the guy who was elected in Kiev legitimately was elected largely with East Ukrainian votes. So this is part of the reason why the East Ukrainians are so upset about this. So it's a total mess. All I can say is that when push comes to shove, for the Russians, this is life or death. It's life or death as to what happens in Ukraine, as to whether this thing winds up being dragooned into NATO, which is what Washington wants. For us, however, it's not life or death. It's really just an optional conflict.
Right. Okay, well, moving on to yet another conflict that is not really so optional, I think, for us is ISIL, Islamic State, ISIS. What is happening there? We continue to hear larger swaths of areas being taken over, new recruits, U.S. kids that are joining the terrorists.
Yeah, it's horrendous. I mean, that really is a threat. It has implications for for us, but for many other countries. For Israel, it has implications for Iran, it has implications for Russia, Europe, and the whole idea of creating what they're describing as a caliphate, which would be a thing ruled by Islamic law. Which has all kinds of human rights implications from the Western point of view. How women are treated and things. So yeah, this is a big problem, And it's not clear how you deal with it. The big issue is, should there be U.S. boots on the ground to deal with this?
Right.
How do you stop it without U.S. boots on the ground is a question that's being raised.
We don't seem to have a real handle on it.
Well, the way to do it would be to work with local forces. And one force that could certainly work would be the Syrian army, which has a vested interest in getting rid of these people.
Right.
But we're at loggerheads with Assad.
We and Bashar al-Assad are not exactly the best of friends right now. Maybe there will be a rapprochement between the two of them and we can get that going. But for now, that's all we have time for. I appreciate your insights on this, and thanks for joining us on Arise News Weekend. Well, when we come back, the potential impact of Attorney General Eric Holder's request for a moratorium on the death penalty. You're watching Arise News Weekend.